Dr. Chris Lee, welcome to Podcastina.
Thank you so much. Excited to be here. Let's get weird.
I'm excited to have you. What is the worst misconception about our brains that you see circulating?
Ooh. Oh, you're gonna right out of the gate. What's the oh gosh.
I love to just put you right in the hot seat.
Yeah. I think I think the biggest issue is that we tend to create so much. Oh man, this is such a hard question because there's so many different things going on. So the first thing that comes to mind is that there's this like dopamine detox thing going around, which is absolute nonsense. Like, let me stare at the wall for 60 seconds and then my nervous system's going to completely reset, which makes absolutely no sense in like the long run. Like, I am just coming out of writing my book on dopamine. So people are like staring at the wall for an hour, but then they immediately go back to all the dissociative behaviors for the rest of the day. Like the other like 15 hours that they're awake, like it's really not going to do them a huge favor. I think the other one, the biggest misconception is the misconceptions themselves. That like the brain does X and then Y. No, the brain is just this weird, convoluted mix of networks that is like running complex algorithms and like depending on the amount of sodium and calcium channels that are like depolarizing and like how much stress that you experience or how emotionally regulated that you are. Like every experience that you go to is always going to produce the availability for response or reaction. And that in and of itself is such a like grand and broad term because depending on the amount of sleep you had, how hard the discussions you had today were, like we tend to crash out and be stressed about things and be like, well, where did that stress come from? And it's like, that was just the straw that broke the camel's back. So there is so many of these different things that are kind of going on out there. And I've even had to go back on a lot of my old videos and
Oh,
be
wow.
like, oh, those things are not accurate anymore. Right. Like what has allowed me to be really strong in the nervous system world is humility more than anything else. That like I do know some really awesome things and I know some really awesome strategies, but some of them, while they are rooted in really awesome, cool science, some of them are just rooted in knowing how to make a human uncomfortable enough to recognize that they need to make change
Well,
safely.
oh, yeah, that's such a good
Huge.
point. And I so
Yeah.
appreciate that you're like, oh, I'm willing to go back and correct things because I do think that's like the sign of someone who is authentic to the practice of science itself, where you're like willing to go back and be like, hey, this wasn't necessarily the most accurate thing. It was just what we had at the time. So let's
Yeah.
reassess and let's update the information that we have.
Yeah. Science is all about being curious about things we don't understand. Right. And there's a million and a half ways to go do it. And I tell everybody that even though I've got my background in science and then I head down the nervous system route and did this and I did that. Um, to understand your nervous system, all you need is pen, paper, and a little pattern awareness. That's truly, you don't need 10 years of neuroscience. Like, not that I don't appreciate my 10 extra years of neuroscience, but really you just need to understand that it's you today against you tomorrow against you yesterday.
Mm.
And understanding the different formats of like, well, where do I want to go? And how do I want to get there? And what would stop me from getting there? Or what would motivate me to get there? And if it's all, oh my gosh, I don't know, you get more information through experimentation, period. So don't be afraid to try.
I love that. I'm so glad that you touched on the whole, oh, we can't just fix our entire nervous system and dopamine misalignment by staring at the wall for 60 seconds. We are in this
Yeah.
time where we have access to more information and tools than ever as far as getting ourselves regulated. And at the same time, it feels like people are more dysregulated than ever. What do you think's behind this like crazy polarity?
Overstimulation, emotional dissociation.
Mm.
Yeah, for sure, 100%. Um, so the next layer behind that truly is that our our brain wants to constantly drive towards high value, low effort, right? So that doesn't mean that it is actually high effort. It can be perceptive high effort. So perceptive high effort is going to be, I have no idea where my phone is, but imagine me looking at my phone right now and scrolling, right? My nervous system is also in a place, or let's pretend that it is, where I have like stuff going on in my life and it's producing fear in my body and stress and grief and confusion and all of these other different things. Now, A healthy version of me is going to sit with those feelings and be like, oh man, what is going on? Because feelings are nothing more than environmental data helping you understand how to feel in this moment. Keep yourself safe, keep yourself opportune, and identify where to go next. That's it, right? Now, how to do that is a totally different story. But what if instead of sitting in this discomfort, which absolutely feels like a dumpster fire, I'd rather take Razor Scooter to the shin than sit with this pain and grief and suffering? What if there was this magical black device that I could look at constantly and inevitably with an infinite scroll that feels productive, more productive than me sitting with my feelings, and I could just get lost in like cats being scared of cucumbers? That might actually be way more evolutionarily beneficial, but realistically, like it's not even close, right? Because we have so much clinical data now behind, okay, emotional suppression. What happens if we don't feel our feelings? And it's like, well, it's just as bad as having type 2 diabetes. It's just as bad as smoking. It's just as bad as not working out. It's just as bad as a bad diet. Well, why is that? Joe Dispenza has this quote that thoughts are the language of the mind and feelings are the language of the body. And if they're trying to have a conversation and it's a one-way conversation, your mind is going to constantly exaggerate, anticipate, and expect bad things to occur, especially if it's flying blind because you're not able to connect with your feelings. It's forced into guessing. And your mind cannot guess anything that hasn't created or expected in the future or the past. So it's constantly expecting and anticipating bad shit to happen because bad shit has happened to all of us in the past. Am I allowed to swear? Is it too late now? We're doing it anyways.
It's crazy because it does feel, I wouldn't think it was like a productive thing to numb out, but for whatever reason, that seems to be the biological mechanism is, oh, I don't want to feel pain at all, so let me do this thing to mask it. But it sounds like it's not actually going anywhere. It's not actually helping deplete the pain. It's just kind of like masking it, but it's still underneath all of that doom
So it's
scrolling.
it's a signal to noise ratio type of thing, right? So it is absolutely masking it. It's masking it with something that's louder. That's what the scrolling is. Scrolling does a lot of different things, like fragmented attention. Really screws up our ability to like accurately look at how much effort something is going to require. We can see dysregulation in an area of the brain called the striatum, which perceives effort, right? So if our nervous system is constantly driving towards low effort, high value through scrolling, and that's the benchmark for what dopamine is for. And dopamine is released in anticipation of needing to take action, collect information between where you're currently presently at and value on the other side, or avoidance of pain, right? So it's not like this reward molecule, but if the only thing that it has experienced or consistently experiences is scrolling as the reward mechanism and the anticipation of that value, when something hard pops up, it doesn't even have the skill set anymore to even feel motivated to sit down and have your feelings. The only thing that's like available to it is like, why don't we just scroll this away? Because you know it's going to work. But it also creates time blindness, right? So when we get stressed out, time is calculated over the frontal cortex. And when we get stressed out, that's one of the first things that goes offline. So we're not only creating this like skewed amount of effort that has to occur, that we turn mountains from molehills, right? But in addition to that, we're running into a ton of different issues with motivation and anhedonia, which is the complete lack of pleasure in our lives.
What's going on in the brain mechanically when I am actually trying to do something productive on my phone? Let's say I open my phone, I grab it because I need to send an email, and I immediately get distracted and open Instagram.
For the most part, it is like these familiarity pathways. So a habit has three different things inside of it: trigger, behavior, reward. So if your system is really familiar to opening up your phone and you're trying to get some work done, but 90% of the time you're driving towards social media, your system is going to just skip over what you're trying to do. And it's just going to go like directly there. It's a bad habit, right? We can call these things bad habits. And if you want to break these bad habits, you can increase the amount of effort that it requires to get there, or you can demotivate based on the reward. So pathways get repeated that get rewarded. So for a lot of people, they're repeating these pathways and they're like, I don't know where it's coming from. Well, you have to find what the reward is. Now, the issue is that stress mechanics will tell us that when we are experiencing survival, surviving is the reward. We did it. This is like the thing. But realistically, that's not a sustainable path, as every person that's been in survival mode has ever known, ever.
Absolutely. I'm curious how you feel about the optimization culture that we're in the throes of right now.
Oh, it's hard because I'm a business owner and I want to be a successful business owner, right? I want to be good at it. And I am good at it. I am good at what I do. And I know that there are so many diminishing returns on the hustle and grind culture. And especially now more than ever, it's not just in business. It's also performative everywhere. Like there's performative relationships, there's performative parenting where we just don't allow ourselves the space to exist, right? So one aspect of this that I recognize is it feels really good to be really, really stimulated
Mm-hmm.
and to like push forward and to like grind and to get that type of like work done. And I'm also in the very, very end of finishing my book. And I've been able to see how shitty my work is when I push beyond my limits. So my goal every day is to do somewhere between 2 and 3 hours of like focused, concentrated research, make videos, do keynotes, do podcasts like this, 2 to 3 days, 2 to 3 hours. And that's like my Goldilocks zone. Now I can also get 2 to 3 hours worth of like administrative work done and send emails and do all the other parts of like running the business. But if I supersede that and I do it consistently, it will always lead me to burnout.
Mm-hmm.
But the issue with burnout, again, is that it messes with your priorities. So the issue with you losing your spark and fading away is that it happens so gradually, you don't experience it until somebody says something or until you crash and burn. And that's what most people are experiencing is this crash and burn. And oh my gosh, like why, how did I get here? I don't know who I am outside of these things. I don't know who I am outside of this performative aspect of myself. So you have to find what that Goldilocks zone is. And I live to live. I don't live to work, right? I love what I do. And like, I'm really proud of myself for how I've been able to build these things up and still be a dad and still be a good person and still like have good social friends and go to the gym and do all of those things. But it is those things like being a good dad and like playing Mario Kart and taking my daughter to the beach and like reading books and like having routines and cooking dinners. That's what allows me to be so good at the 2 to 3 hours that I do every day.
If someone's trying to maybe find that point, is there any kind of warning sign before burnout happens? Like, how does one find their Goldilocks zone?
I always think that there are whispers to something going astray, always. And if you don't listen to the whispers, you get the screams. And very much so, I can recognize that for me, right? When I am working too hard, I just take things really seriously. And I'm not a serious person, right? Like I'm a very playful, I'm like this entire thing is a game, right? And I just want to play. Like the more I play, the better I am at being me. But when I work too hard, everything is work. Everything has to be done. I'm like using timers for everything and like, okay, all right, I got to get breakfast done in 20 minutes. Okay, go. All right, now I need to brush my daughter's hair in 3 minutes. Okay, go. And it's like, whoa, 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 whoa. Like I'm so disconnected from the present moment that I'm like reaching for like the third action beyond what I'm doing right now. And then I'm just exhausted in the wrong way. I think you want to be exhausted in the right ways. And that's kind of a weird way to describe exhaustion. But for example, I have really struggled, truly struggled to sit down and write this book. It's a lot of research. It was a ton of research. It was a hell of a project. And I'm doing that in the midst of maintaining relationships and working my business and homeschooling my daughter and doing all of these other things. And it was like, oh, how hard is it to write a book? Very hard, right? But the days that I would sit down and I was waking up and still do wake up at 4:30 to like do some of this research and do some of this work, I would be hitting like 7, 8 at night. I'm like, I'm so blissfully tired. I'm so happy. Like what a blessing it is to be exhausted for the things that I choose. And that's doing the right thing. Like that's investing my daily battery allotment to things that I care about instead of reactions that I truly don't.
I would imagine this has a great deal to do with people learning to become more embodied because so many of the signals are not coming from the brain, but rather from below the neck.
Yeah, I think so. I've been told by people that I don't respect and people that I do respect that I'm a very emotive person, that I'm very like expressive. And there's been people in my life that have tried to make that a bad thing. And there's been periods of my life where I've let them and been like, oh yeah, you know what? I am an emotional person. Um, but I'm not. I worked really hard to be me, to be this version of me that can be Chris and be silly and weird. And like realistically, I don't really care as much what people think about me as much as I care about how I feel. And that's, I mean, like, what a turn has that been for me where I used to get validated from the outside in. And now it's like, I got to do that from the inside out. And especially with social media and things like that, it's so easy to outsource that and be like, oh, that thing did really well. Therefore, I am worthy to receive love and do all those things. And it's like, no, because then if I ever need to go find that again, I'm not the person that has it. Something else has it. Someone else has it. And I think there's something to say about healthy relationships. And I think there's something to say about allowing somebody else to hold that space for you. Before, I think a lot of us, it's about being able to manage and hold that for ourselves as well.
Beautifully put. So, since you're writing a book about dopamine, and obviously this is a weighted question, but what's your personal definition if you had to describe dopamine to me like I'm in fifth grade?
So dopamine is a neurotransmitter, and dopamine is also a neuromodulator, which means that dopamine can also not only communicate from neuron to neuron, it interacts with networks inside of the brain that have dopamine receptors. So these dopamine receptors are very much in charge of our ability to go execute and take action on. And they communicate in a ton of different ways. But there is not only dopamine that helps us go, there's also dopamine that tells us to stop. And then there's also dopamine that is very, very influential on how we learn from experience. And there's a ton of different models that we can understand based on these things, which I am more than happy to go through. One thing that I think is overestimated and misunderstood is that dopamine is like this reward chemical. I
Mhm.
think a lot of people know that now, that it has to do with anticipation and reward, but also in the context of all of this, dopamine very much has to do with our ability to learn through experience as well. And there's a lot of different phases and expressions of dopamine, but there's two major ones that I talk about inside my book. So there's tonic dopamine, and tonic dopamine is like background dopamine. And it kind of works almost like a buffer against uncertainty throughout your day. And it is a stabilization that kind of lingers inside of the synaptic cleft, which is like the space between your neurons. And it's there to kind of maintain motivation. So when other chemicals are being like shared and pushed through neuron to neuron and network to network, that dopamine is helping them and building like this antagonistic, oh yeah, we should go do this thing. So it just kind of floats around in the background. And it's just mood stabilization is a huge thing, and just like baseline motivation to like take your coffee cup and put it in the dishwasher and fold your laundry and like, just kind of maintain in that way. And it's really, really important. And a lot of people are really dysregulated from it because tonic dopamine is built up through sleep and exercise and the things that are often the first thing that we throw away. So that tends to be a really big difficulty for a ton of different individuals. Now, in addition to that, some of the other issues that come up with that is people that have ADHD also tend to have lower tonic dopamine. Now, the studies that are done on this are not humongous, they're not gigantic. However, it can give us a bit of an insight into people with ADHD struggling with kind of getting started and getting motivated and like getting themselves to a stable point in time. But that takes us into phasic dopamine. So phasic dopamine for, let's just say neurotypical, which truly doesn't even exist. But let's say that it's somebody that like falls within the averages, right? Phasic dopamine is this burst of dopamine that's meant to drive us towards like action in the next like 5 to 10 minutes and like motivate us to go get or receive the value that is in front of us. And this can help us with productivity. This can help us with accomplishment. For me, helps me write this book, helps me like make dinner for like my daughter, helps me play, helps me do all of these different things. And there is a limitation to how much of that phasic dopamine that we can release every day before we just get completely exhausted, completely bombarded, and we like completely shut down. So we have to keep that in mind too, is that we only have so much of this like to go out and release. And then we have to go, either rely on other systems or be able to recognize that like we're getting depleted and it's going to exhaust us in a period of time. People with ADHD have a higher phasic dopamine, more is released. And this is where the hyperfixation comes from. So for a lot of people with ADHD, they also have this delayed release of phasic dopamine, which means that I would release dopamine as somebody who's neurotypical in response to value, right? I see value, need to go do it. Somebody that has ADHD has this delayed response where they let a little bit of dopamine go when they recognize value, but their value, their dopamine is more released when they get some value, when they receive it. So the misconception about dopamine being a reward chemical is a little bit more accurate for people with ADHD. And then there's the predictive mechanism. So we have different receptors for dopamine as well. There's D1 receptors that tell us to continue, go, do the thing. And then there's D2 receptors. Well, it goes all the way up to 7, right? But we're not going to get into all of those. But the D2 is essentially stop. That's because the juice is not worth the squeeze. We're not getting what we expected. And this is the other huge part of dopamine is before we take action on the perceived value that we're trying to accomplish, our brain is creating models. So our brain is creating an expectation and a model for how things are going to go. And then when we go drive towards that action, that behavior, our brain very much is trying to compare reality to the model that we make. And then it's basically doing some quick math on those and saying, okay, what's actual? Was the model accurate? Was it inaccurate? And this is called reward prediction error, RPE. And there's positive, neutral, and negative. Positive means that the model that we created in our head was even better than reality, reality was even better than the model that we predicted. So drive more D1, more dopamine. The next time we're in this environment, go do more of it. Go, 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 go. Then there is neutral, which is they match reality, match the outcome in the model that we predicted. Awesome, let's go do it again. Then there's negative, where we didn't get as much value as we originally thought. And that hits a D2. And our brain says, okay, we did it, but we don't really want to go do that. And so much of that has to do with our ability to experience value, right? And learn through experience. This is where habit loops, repetition, consistency, a lot of these different patterns really start to kind of play through. So questions on that? There's a small 7-minute little yeehaw on dopamine.
Yes, a few things. So you mentioned there's different receptors. That makes sense. Are the chemical compounds of phasic and tonic, are those different?
No, as far as I know, it is all consistent across the board, but there is some literature showing that like the quality of it can be reflected in like how well somebody's diet is. And like there's different antagonists and different chemicals that you can take that bind to different receptors that will make more dopamine live in the synaptic cleft. And that's what stimulants do, and Ritalin and stuff like that. But for the most part, it should, as far as I know, be consistent across the board.
Yeah, it almost makes me think of like I had been diagnosed with ADHD back in college. And for whatever reason, instead of giving me Adderall, which is like the rapid release, they gave me Vyvanse, which is like the slow release. So I'm wondering, my curiosity jumps to, is Vyvanse like working on the tonic rather than the phasic? Does Adderall work on the phasic? And we don't have to get into like the medication portion of it, but just to help like me understanding the two different ones. Cause this is my first time hearing that there's even two different kinds.
Yeah. So it is, the answer is yes. So when you take a medication, and I am not an MD, I am not a prescriptive doctor, I'm a scientist, I'm a nerd, right? So You always need to talk to your PCPs and like do all the things. My entire disclaimer for this. My understanding of this is that these medications that people take, they act as antagonists to dopamine. So they will go to these receptors and they will bind to these receptors. And as they're bound to those receptors, it will increase the brain's perception of how much we experience from that. Now, dopamine is not just about these behavioral and learning attributes. The amount of dopamine inside of our body also has to do with motor function as well and fluidity. And we can see this in people who have Parkinson's. And the classic telltale for Parkinson's is people kind of have these like shaky tremors that kind of go on. And this is because the substantia nigra starts to atrophy, or it starts to die out. And the substantia nigra is where a lot of dopamine cells are. It's nigra because it's dark from the amount of receptors the amount of cells that are producing dopamine. But as it starts to die off, our brain starts to produce less of that dopamine. So we give them something that is the precursor to dopamine called L-DOPA. And L-DOPA will go inside of there and it'll help kind of bind up with more tyrosine and a couple other factors and go and give them more of that dopamine. And for a lot of people with Parkinson's, it does, according to the data, help them kind of smooth out and have some more of that stability. Now, that comes with its own side effects and consequences, because when you mess with one system, you can't completely stop it from doing with others. So the research that I had reviewed with people taking L-DOPA showed that they also had like 17 to 30% of them became compulsive gamblers, compulsive sex addicts. And that's because dopamine has a huge role to play with addiction as well. So all these factors, and this is the thing with medication, and I imagine MDs and other pharmacists would potentially agree with this. I can't speak for them, obviously, but there's always side effects. There's always risk reward, and to build some of those things in. Which is why when I work with my coaching clients, I tell them you need to go talk to your doc. But my goal is always to leverage behavior, sleep, diet, exercise, and then work on the structure around that and let the systems kind of bolster up against what you might be sufficient or deficient in.
Those are always our best tools to kind of start with to get this stuff regulated.
Yeah, but there's truly no shame in needing those other things as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like there's been areas and times in my life where I'm taking consistent supplementation because like my system's just barbecued, right? So like I'm bolstering up with fish oils and I'm using magnesium and a ton of other things to just kind of help my system over some of these humps too. So there's a lot of the shame that gets kind of built out there, but I would invite people to consider seeing it differently.
Oh, for sure. And I think intuitively, it's like life isn't set up to cater to the way that these systems are. Like if I have to go do something and I'm anticipating rejection, which I know is like a reality and a deep fear for a lot of people, but
Yeah.
what's going on dopaminergically? Like how can I kind of, I guess, tweak that system or work with it if I'm trying to do something, but I'm anticipating rejection in the thing that I have to do?
So we only fear that which we expect, right? And that's because of prior experience. So oftentimes we don't fear which we intend and create because it's oftentimes novelty, right? So we often are building and creating and being intentional in ways that's like, oh, I've never done that before. I've never thought about it in that way before. So if you know that you're going to go into an environment that you have the potential to be reactive in, and you're afraid that you're going to be rejected, go in with a plan. So my system goes into this thing and it's like, all right, I want to have this conversation, but I'm afraid that I'm going to be rejected. Awesome. What can you do to support your nervous system with a plan, a system, strategy, or schedule that's going to be intentional? Do you need to practice what that's going to be? Because if that pattern is constantly outriding the new and the available, the opportunity, if fear is suppressing the opportunity, if you rinse and repeat that, you're only going to get more of it. So being intentional and saying, okay, in the past, I've done this and man, that really did not work well for me, or man, that thing really didn't serve me. How is it that I want to move through this? That's the space that you want to be. And then saying that, okay, the fear is not telling me that I want to avoid, the fear is telling me what residual emotion is left over. Perfect. What is the residual emotion that is left over? What does that look like? How do you want to experience? And that will kind of give you the different perspective of how you want to move forward with time and space.
It's the repeated actions, the repeated expectations. And I do so much. I have so many conversations about like manifestation. I'm pretty woo woo, but
Yeah.
it kind of boils down to your thoughts do create your reality because you keep repeating certain thoughts. It etches its way down into a belief. Next thing you know, it's your whole identity. So if you do go out into this world and you're like, nothing's ever going to work out, you are going to get that reflected back to you.
Without a doubt. Yeah. I deeply, deeply believe in that.
Me too. I want to dive a little bit deeper into what sounds like probably the most problematic, um, detrimental thing to our dopamine these days, which is our phones.
Hmm.
How do we understand what's going on in our brain when we see rage bait?
So our brain has an affinity for the negative, right? It 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 just is attached to that information because if we think back to how our brains evolved in nature, it very much wanted to be aware but not engaged in the problem so that we can learn and like reflect and go, I see how this, okay, I understand. And that for a lot of people is what rage bait is doing. It is just practicing an issue. It's building more of that expectation. It's building up more of that model. So when people come to me and send me messages and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so anxious, but I'm also so addicted to my phone. I'm like, well, you're just bolstering up your problems. Like you are truly, and you have to take a lot of responsibility for this as well, that your brain will look at those issues. And then the algorithm feeds on that too. Like there is people in, Meta and Instagram that very much their job is to like look at human psychology and neurology and say what's going to create these triggers, what's going to build these engagements, and then drive information through and through and through that over and over and over and over again. So we have to be very intentional with how we use it. Now, I'm saying this as somebody who's got, 800,000 followers across all these different platforms, and it shows up in a ton of different ways. I've recognized that I'm trying to make longer form content. Like I want to do more podcasts. I want to do more 5, 6, 7 minute videos to try to break those things up, full well knowing that dopamine system reset takes like 6 to 8 weeks, right? So there's a lot of different challenges that people are going to face as they go through this. One of them is that you're going to have to realize that you're addicted to this thing, very much so, right? And it sucks you into this world and you're like 1, 2, 3, 4, 10, 30, 40 swipes in and you don't remember a thing. But the thing that you get stuck on, and like this is the difference between Meta knowing if you're a male or a female, it's giving you totally different things based on what you're afraid and stressful for. Truly. Like, and you can totally see this too. So I've got female friends that have asked about this in the past and like, hey, let me show you your feed. Let me see your feed. And theirs is very much like, like fitness models and things like that. That's like very body shame, like body rejection, things like that. And then I'm very much not on my phone and I am very proud of that, but it also knows that I am a dude. And it also, because it's got access to my microphone, it is listening to your conversations all the time, right? So if I go on mine, it's like, here's how to be a masculine man, need to be a provider, need to make millions of dollars. And it's like, oh, that's gross too, because like, man, like what the amount of shame that people experience from those patterns as well. So the best place is to get off, truly. Like if you're going to run a business on there, run your business, do your thing, and then get off, but do it in a way that I also think is ethically responsible. And that's the shift that I've made. Like, I'm as guilty as the next person for having very clickbaity hooks and like, oh, you'll never believe in this. And now I'm like, okay, here's this and here's that. And yeah, does it like mess with your views? For sure. Do I sleep better at night? Also very much yes. And I've also shifted to like blogs and other things. So your brain gets attached to the things that it fears. So what your algorithm is probably also very much a reflection of the things that you're afraid of.
I'm so glad that you touched on that because I actually was going to ask, how do you reconcile knowing how bad our phones are for us and also being a content creator?
Um, in exactly that way. Like you've got books on your bookshelf. Like I read all the time. I watch movies. I play with my daughter. Like, I love being a dad. I like it is the greatest joy of my life is hanging out with my daughter. And she's 8 now. And like we just do stuff. We go to the beach, we paddleboard, we go get ice cream. Like she carries journals around with her, and like we play like, you know, twigs and sprouts and like tic-tac-toe and like line, like we play all of these different things and have conversations and like be a part of society and like sit in the grass and look at the clouds and like we read poetry and like we do so many different things that for me, I want her to grow up in a house that is as close to British television as I possibly can get for her. Truly. Now, it doesn't mean that I don't have a TV in my living room. I do. And it doesn't mean that we go days without watching TV, because we don't. Because at the end of the day, right now it is July in South Florida. And despite me having a hoodie on, it is hot as hell outside. Like so hot that like I have no business going outside in this moment. Like it's uncomfortable, right? Like I
I'm
love
in
the heat, but
Texas, I understand.
it's gross, right? So great. There's definitely a time and a place where her and I have like sat down and we've watched a movie or two. And like it doesn't mean that like I'm completely cutting her off from it either, because I've tried that too. We didn't have a TV until she was 4 in the house. And I think that did a lot of good things for her. And now we've got a TV in the house. It's been 4 years. She has a Nintendo Switch too. And it's all about responsibility and using it well. Now, there's been a few times, there's been a handful of times, like I am by no means like trying to say that I'm like a perfect parent, where I've just let her like use it. Like when we have hurricanes and crap that blow through, I'm like, do it, use it. And then she's like, why do I feel like this? And I'm like, I've sat on the couch for 6 hours and like played Animal Crossing. Like, she's like, I don't like this. I'm like, great, great. Like, let's do some things. And like like my origami's on the floor, but she's super into origami right now. So I got like swans all over my house. And like, um, you have to find hobbies again, honestly, hobbies and people.
Yeah, that's so smart. I'm curious, is there a like a framework we can apply to our thinking when I see something online that pisses me off and that might take me down like a bad rabbit hole? Maybe there's some kind of like quick stop that I can put to my thoughts, like recognition. Oh, this is about to lead me down a bad path. Like, let me
Oh
stop
yeah.
it dead in
Oh
its tracks.
yeah. We make this as real as we possibly need to. So I had kind of mentioned like before we got on, that I had gone through like a breakup, like all of us do, and they suck. You know what sucks even worse is going through a breakup and then opening your phone and it's like bam, 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 like how to get them back, how to leave them alone, how to go no contact, how to reach out, how to send them like oh God, what is this absolute shitstorm? So when this had occurred and I like opened my phone and I'm like trying to go through and like respond to messages and make content and I'm sad and I'm blah and I'm this and I'm that. And I'm like, what the oh my God, I feel like shit right now going through this. And you have to ask the question of like when these things like really trigger you, number one, like, is this mine? Or like, am I just a bleeding heart of empathy? Because so much of this triggering content out there is like just leeching your empathy. You feel bad for things that you don't even need to feel bad about. And you have to be really careful with that too, because for the most part, empathy can't really be stopped. My really good friend, Ben Rain, wrote a book, Why Brains Need Friends. And he talks all about empathy and compassion and how important it is, but you need to give it to real people, not fake people. And I think that's a huge issue that's going on, is we're giving it to people that we don't even know with problems that we can't even help with. So that's its own issue. But when I get caught up in those spirals and I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel like absolute trash watching this right now. I feel like insufficient and not, I should be doing so much more. And oh my gosh, I should change my principles. Is, oh man, if I think that this video is going to influence the way that I'm taking action, I didn't actually have clarity on my decision to start with. So I need to go back to the framework and say, okay, this thing's upsetting me because at some point it's put me into uncertainty. It's put me into a place of like, I don't actually know how I'm going to take action and I want to change that. That's messed up. And it's not messed up where you shame yourself. It's just, oh, I think I'm ready to take different action. And then you do.
When someone is at the very beginning of starting to kind of break all this down, maybe they want to repair how dysregulated their dopamine systems are from habitually being on their phones. What are like some digestible, easy steps? You mentioned it takes like 6 to 8 weeks.
It takes 6 to 8 weeks. You need to get some app blockers. You need to get like a Get Brick, right? That thing that you like tag your phone on, because it's an addiction. And you need to have your phone with you, right? So, but most people can't control themselves, truly, and that's an issue. So if you can't control yourself, then you need to stop. Like you have to make it less available, or you have to increase how to get to it. And that's a bitch in and of itself. But for a lot of people, I tell them to get back out in nature, get back into your relationships. Like if you're in a relationship with somebody, if you're married, and you're like, oh man, I'm super struggling with this. Tell your partner that like, I want to spend more time with you. Like I would love to love up on you. Like, can we cuddle more? Can we talk more? Do you want to read a book together? Do you want to do this? Do you want to do that together? Play with your kids more. Like the one thing that I tell a lot of people is like, great, you're getting started. Open your screen time, see how much you have, and then see how much you want to have next week. See how much you want to have the week after that. See how much you want to have the week after that. Great, you've got 2 extra hours a day. What's something fun that you would like to do with that 2 extra hours? And then go do it. Because the issue is we're consuming it in these 10 to 15 minute like bites, right? So some people have this like 6 hour screen time and they're like, it's like 90% is social media. And it's like, okay, is that helpful? Is that like helping you in any way? And everyone says yes. Of course, I'm learning so much. No, if you did 6 hours of reading a book, that's a different way of consuming content because the fragmented attention of, oh, I learned this and here's how I'm going to apply it. You're just learning and learning and learning and learning and learning and never actually doing something with it, which in my opinion is going to lead to more confusion because increased information leads to increased availability of choices. And that increased availability of choices is going to not allow you to make healthy choices, which is an issue, right? So you owe it to yourself to get clarity and kind of settle into how it is that you do want to move through space. And it's uncomfortable. So you also need to befriend the discomfort because oftentimes scrolling is dissociative, right? So we scroll because we're trying to do X. We scroll because we're trying to avoid Y. But when suddenly the boredom comes back, it's just got to be like, oh God, I'm having a heart attack, right? Like, oh crap, all those feelings. And they are going to start to come back up. So we also have to play into emotional regulation as we do this.
Since so much of this is just avoiding feeling uncomfortable, bored, or even in pain, what's a way to use that boredom or that pain to actually just grow as people as opposed to like using it as a crutch?
So I think fear is probably one of my best teachers because I've learned how to use it instead of it using me, because fear is pointing out all the areas of my life that I haven't allowed myself to be loved. So when these times and opportunities come up where I'm like, oh my gosh, all these big feelings are coming up, your feelings want to be seen, heard, validated, and integrated. And the integration happens when you are in a different state than the way that the original fear or scarcity or whatever that emotion was that was produced. So if that feeling's popping up, can you experience that feeling and then also kind of be metacognitive and say, okay, I'm having this, but this is not that. I'm not in this place again. I'm in my office. I'm in my chair. I've got my cat cup. I've got my journal and I'm chilling. It smells like patchouli in here and it's nice. And I've got my books. So I'm having this thing, but I'm also reinforcing like, okay, but I'm not in danger the way that my system thought I was in danger before. And when you do that, it takes kind of the venom out of the fear itself. The fear is no longer dangerous. The fear just exists. And when it just exists, you're able to sit down and go, oh, hey there. Oh, okay. Hey, I see you. Okay. No, yeah, it's okay. Sit down. Sit down. It's okay. And then it can kind of express itself in a different way. I'm a big fan of therapy, big fan of parts work. And I think being able to put those things together and settle yourself into understanding it with one of those mentalities or one of those frameworks can be really beneficial for a lot of people that are trying to understand their feelings.
That's so true. It's a really tough one. Is that kind of some of what you've found helpful for yourself if you like catch yourself? It sounds like you've moved through quite a bit of this, but in a moment where you're like maybe stuck, especially because you have a large following,
Yeah.
have you ever like caught yourself looking at comments and stuff and being like, I got to get out of this? What's helpful for you?
I'm honestly really good about it. Like I'm not going to say that it wasn't an issue in the past, but it's really rare that I'll go and like really ruminate on something on social media because I've put some content out there and it's been attacked. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Or like people have taken it and they're like, this guy is such a bad person and he's a blah and he's a blah. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And it only perpetuates in my life if I engage in it. And it's the consequence of putting content out there. Truly. So it's like, if I just let it go and be like, okay, cool, like that sucks, but like they misunderstood it, or maybe I communicated it poorly. But if I just continue to engage in it, those people want to fight. I want to move on. So I'm at a really solid place now where I post content. I try to post every day. Sometimes I'm better, sometimes I'm worse at it. But for the most part, I'm just trying to hold space for myself. Really trying to like, no, I don't need to be on here. I've got friends, I got life. I'm gonna go to the gym, hang out with I'm gonna do all these other things. They're so much more important. Now, it doesn't mean that I don't respond to comments. It doesn't mean that I'm like not there, but I'm typically like I'm setting timers for these types of things so I don't get sucked into that world. So like if I showed you like my feed now, I have no idea what's on that thing. Couldn't be happier about it realistically. But I do know that I have poetry on my desk inside of there. I do know that I was journaling with my red journal this morning, and I know what's inside of that. I know what is going on in my life, right? So page is public, but life is private. That's the way that I choose to live through it.
I love what you said about setting a timer, because that is such like a low barrier to entry tool. Literally everybody has a timer on their phone, and if you do
Mm-hmm.
again need it for something like work, what a good little like readily available tool to be like, okay, I'm going to be on this for 5 minutes. At the end of 5 minutes, I have to have accomplished what I needed to accomplish on this thing and nothing extra.
That's it. That's what I tell everybody to do. Like I have, you get them on Amazon. They're like a twist timer. That's on my fridge, and then I usually bring it to my office. And I'm like, I set it to 20 minutes, and like I sit here and I do it. So I'll drink my coffee. I do it a lot, and it's just like I'm so productive with it.
Yeah.
So especially because people with ADHD value time differently. If your brain is struggling with procrastination with ADHD, put the task out and then put the pressure of time, and your system perceives time differently. So you might kind of find that your system, under the pressure of a timer, executes way harder than it typically would.
That's such a good tip. I'm going to use that moving forward. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
How would you say your understanding of resilience has helped you move through hard emotions?
I've been through some shit in my life. Um, but somebody once told me just because you've gone through it doesn't mean that you've integrated it.
Mm.
And that one really stuck with me because I was like, yeah, I've gone through a lot of these like hard things, but have I worn it like a scarlet A, or have I done something with it? And for myself, I think resilience when it comes to emotions is knowing that during turbulent seasons, you have to learn to surf. It's not a time where you go swim, you surf. And when you surf, you have to ride the wave. You have to ride the feeling. You have to ride the thing that's coming in. But then inevitably, it will calm itself. So, like the principle of the more you avoid, the larger it gets with feelings, especially like when big things happen or challenges occur in my life, uncertain, predictable, whatever the heck that it is. My goal is to be as bored and sit with that thing in the first 48, 72, 1 week as I possibly can. And never has it ever disappointed me, ever. It's always just left me present. And yeah, it's uncomfortable. For sure sucks, right? Man, I've cried, I've screamed, I've been frustrated, I've been hurt in all the other ways. But sitting with it has always shown my body that it's okay to have these feelings. Mm-hmm. It's okay to have it. It's okay. Which is not something that I think a lot of men specifically give themselves the opportunity to do, to express vulnerability in that way.
Oh, absolutely. And I think ultimately the discomfort is prolonged when we do ignore it, when we don't give it that space that it deserves right as it's happening.
Well, it comes out in the worst ways then, right? It comes out through not taking responsibility for it on your own and taking responsibility for it in other shitty ways, or projecting it, or however it may be, but it never works to our favor. Life, right? It's the imperfections of it.
Absolutely. Is there anything else that you're excited about with your book that's coming out? Is there anything you can kind of give us like a little teaser with it?
So much more of this book ended up being about how to be a human again
Mm,
and what that looks like. And it was, I think one of the hardest parts about that is I don't know how to be you. I only know how to be me. And I also know that if I only share my life experiences, but I don't share the principles behind them, that it more than likely is going to kind of create this like, well, Chris is doing it, so it must be right. And I've tried not to stick to that. I've tried to stick to maybe this is probably a better perspective to hold, or maybe this is a better perspective to hold, or maybe you should try to challenge these paradigms. So the book is really practical in a lot of different ways. And then it butts up against the emotions of life. And then we got to figure out what to go do with it. And I give the reader as much responsibility as they can tolerate.
incredible. Well, Dr.
Yeah.
Chris Lee, if people want to learn more about what you're doing, where should they go?
You can go to my socials. You can go to my website. If you look up Dr. Chris Lee or if you look up Chris Lee, I'm usually one of the top ones. So that's how people can find me.
Incredible. Well, thank you so much for talking to me today. I really look forward to when the book is out. Do you have a release date yet?
It's spring or summer of 27, so we still got some time.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for doing the show.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Of course. And thank you, everybody, for listening. Bye. If you know somebody that would enjoy this episode, feel free to share it with them. And thank you for listening to Galina Ravina Podcastina, the show where I try to be the person my dog thinks I am. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. See you on the next one.